The year is 1683. The place is the gates of Vienna, the capital of the Holy Roman Empire. A massive Ottoman army, over 150,000 men, has surrounded the city for 2 months. The defenders are starving. Their walls are crumbling. The Grand Vizier, Kara Mustafa, is already planning his victory parade. He believes that nothing on earth can stop the Ottoman war machine. He is wrong, because over the hills to the west, a relief army is approaching. It is a multinational force of Germans, Austrians, and Poles. And at its head, leading the charge, are 3,000 men on horseback. But these are not ordinary horsemen. They wear gleaming breastplates polished to a mirror shine. Their backs are covered in leopard skins and wolf pelts. From their shoulders rise enormous wooden frames covered in eagle, ostrich, and crane feathers, a forest of wings that rustle and scream in the wind. Their lances are 18 feet long, hollowed to be light, tipped with steel. Their horses are stallions bred for rage and speed, and they are about to do something that will echo through history. They will charge downhill into the largest army the world has seen in a century. They will break through the Ottoman lines. They will save Vienna, and they will send the Ottoman Empire into a retreat from which it never fully recovers. These are the Polish Hussars, the winged horsemen, the most terrifying cavalry in the history of Europe. Today we are going to understand why. We will strip away the legend and look at the steel, the horseflesh, and the human will that made the Hussars unbeatable for nearly 2 centuries. By the time we finish, you will know why armies across the continent whispered the same prayer when they saw those wings on the horizon. God save us from the Hussars. To understand the Hussar, you must first forget everything you think you know about heavy cavalry. In most armies, heavy cavalry were the aristocrats, the knights in shining armor who charged in straight lines, crashed into enemy formations, and then sat there, stuck, because their horses were exhausted and their lances were broken. The Hussars were different. They were not knights. They were not nobles, at least, not exclusively. The Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, which created the winged hussars in the early 16th century, needed a cavalry force that could do 3 things: charge with devastating impact, maneuver with lightning speed, and then disengage, reform, and charge again. This required a complete rethinking of cavalry warfare. The hussar's armor was not the full plate of a medieval knight. That was too heavy. A knight in full plate weighed over 300 pounds with his horse. He could charge once, maybe twice, and then his horse was done. The hussar wore a breastplate, a backplate, a helmet, and vambraces on his arms. That was it. His legs were unarmored. His horse wore only a champron, a metal faceplate, and sometimes a petrel, a chest guard. The total weight was about half that of a knight. This meant the hussar could charge at full speed for longer distances. His horse could survive multiple charges, and the hussar himself could move, turn, and fight on foot if necessary. The second innovation was the lance. The hussar lance was not a heavy, clumsy tree trunk. It was a work of engineering, 18 feet long, but hollowed out from 2 halves of fir wood glued together. The inside was empty. The outside was painted red or black. The tip was a steel blade, often with a small flag or ribbon to confuse the enemy's vision. This lance weighed only about 6 pounds. A hussar could carry it for hours. He could couch it under his arm, lower it to horizontal, and deliver a blow that concentrated his horse's full momentum into a single point the size of a coin. That blow could punch through a steel breastplate. It could go through one man, then the man behind him, and still have energy left. But here was the genius. After the lance shattered, and it always shattered, the hussar did not stop. He drew his secondary weapons, a long saber, curved and deadly for slashing. A pair of pistols, usually 4 to 6, tucked in saddle holsters for close-range killing. And sometimes a mace, a warhammer, or a conciers, a long, thin, thrusting sword for finishing fallen enemies. The hussar was a walking arsenal. But his real weapon was not steel. It was shock. Pure, overwhelming, psychological shock. Now we come to the wings. Oh, the wings. They are the most iconic and the most misunderstood part of the hussar. What were they? They were wooden frames, usually an arch or a crossbar, attached to the back of the saddle or to the hussar's shoulders. From these frames, dozens of feathers were mounted: eagle feathers, ostrich feathers, crane feathers, sometimes even the wings of birds of prey. The frame was often covered in leopard skin or wolf fur. The whole assembly stood over 3 feet high. When the hussars stood still, the wings looked absurd, like a theater costume, like a parade decoration. But when the hussars charged, the wings became a nightmare. The wind rushed through the feathers. The feathers vibrated. They produced a low, shrieking, whistling sound, a sound that horses hated and men feared. The wings also served a practical purpose. They protected the hussar's back from lassos and thrown weapons. They made the hussar look larger than human, almost demonic. From a distance, a line of winged hussars looked like a forest of angry angels descending from the sky. The Ottoman chroniclers wrote that the hussars came with the sound of 1,000 screaming eagles. The German mercenaries called them the devils on horseback. The wings did not make the hussars invincible, but they made them terrifying. And on a battlefield, terror is half the victory. Let us talk about the horse. The hussar's horse was not a plough horse or a pack animal. It was a thoroughbred, specifically a breed developed in Poland and Hungary called the Polish Arabian, or the Konik. These horses were smaller than modern draft horses, about 15 hands high, but they were incredibly strong, fast, and intelligent. They could gallop at full speed for over a mile. They could turn on a dime. They could kick, bite, and trample enemy soldiers without being trained to do so. It was instinct. A hussar's horse was also trained to ignore noise, gunfire, screams. The clash of steel, none of it would spook a well-trained hussar horse. But the most remarkable thing about the hussar's horse was the bond between rider and animal. Hussars often raised their horses from foals. They slept near them, they talked to them, they named them like children. In battle, a hussar did not need to pull on the reins or kick with his spurs. He leaned, he shifted his weight, he pressed his knees. The horse understood. That bond was the difference between a good cavalry charge and a legendary one. Without it, the hussars would have been just another group of men on horses. With it, they became a single organism, man and horse, one mind, one will, one engine of destruction. The tactics of the hussars were as refined as their equipment. They did not charge in a straight line like a brick wall. They charged in a loose formation called the hussar wall, a line 3 or 4 ranks deep with gaps between each rider. Why gaps? Because when the front rank hit the enemy, they needed space to turn and escape. The second rank would then crash through the gaps, followed by the third. It was a rolling thunder of impact. The hussars also used a technique called the Polish stride. Instead of galloping at a constant speed, they would walk, then trot, then canter, then gallop, then full sprint. They saved the sprint for the last 50 yards. This meant that when they hit the enemy, their horses were not exhausted. They still had energy for the fight, for the pursuit, for the next charge. And the Hussars always pursued. They did not believe in letting a beaten enemy escape. If you broke against the Hussars, they would chase you for miles, cutting you down with sabers, shooting you with pistols, trampling you under hooves. That is why armies feared the Hussars more than any other cavalry. Other cavalry would break you and then reform. The Hussars would break you and then erase you. Now let us witness the Hussars in their greatest moment. The Battle of Vienna, September 12th, 1683. The Ottoman army has been besieging the city for 2 months. The Holy Roman Emperor has fled. The Pope has called for a crusade. The relief army, commanded by the Polish King Jan III Sobieski, himself a veteran hussar, has arrived. But the Ottomans have dug in. They have trenches, artillery, and a massive fortification line. The relief army attacks all day, making little progress. By late afternoon, Sobieski makes a decision. He will lead the final charge himself. He assembles the cavalry, 18,000 horsemen in total, including 3,000 winged hussars. They form up on the hills overlooking the Ottoman camp. Sobieski rides among them. He says, "Let us go. It is not a man, but the power of God that we trust." He wears a simple blue tunic over his armor, so his own men can see him. He carries a lance painted with the Virgin Mary, and then he gives the signal. The charge begins. 18,000 horsemen move down the slope. It takes them nearly an hour to reach the bottom because the charge is so wide, over a mile from flank to flank. The Ottoman soldiers see the dust cloud first. Then they see the sunlight glinting off the breastplates. Then they hear the wings, the shrieking, the whistling. The sound of 10,000 feathers screaming in the wind. The Ottoman lines break before the Hussars even make contact. The Janissaries, the elite infantry of the Ottoman Empire, fire their muskets. They reload, they fire again. But the Hussars do not stop. The first rank hits the Ottoman fortifications. Lances shatter, horses scream, men die. But the second rank is already through. The third rank, the fourth. The Hussars are inside the Ottoman camp. They are not just charging now, they are killing. Sabers rise and fall. Pistols fire into faces. Horses trample tents, cooking pots, sleeping soldiers. The Grand Vizier Kara Mustafa watches from his tent. He sees his army dissolving. He sees the winged men getting closer. He does not wait, he flees. He leaves behind his treasure, his horses, his banner, and 30,000 dead. The Battle of Vienna is over. The Ottoman Empire will never threaten Europe again, and the Hussars have earned their place in legend. But Vienna was not the only battle. The Hussars had been winning for over a century before Vienna, and they would continue to win for another 100 years after. At the Battle of Kirchholm in 1605, just 2,000 hussars charged and destroyed 11,000 Swedish infantry and cavalry, a 5-to-1 advantage. At the Battle of Clushino in 1610, 5,000 hussars defeated 30,000 Russians and Swedes, killing 5,000 enemies while losing only 300 of their own. At the Battle of Chosim in 1621, the Hussars held off a 150,000-man Ottoman army for a month, then charged and broke them. The numbers are almost unbelievable, but they are true. The Hussars did not just win battles. They won battles where they were outnumbered 5-to-1, 10-to-1, sometimes 20-to-1. How? Speed, shock, and the wings. Always the wings. So what made the Hussars so effective? Let us break it down into 5 elements. First, training. A hussar was not a conscript. He was a professional. He began training as a teenager. He learned to ride before he could read. He practiced the lance on wooden targets, on straw dummies, on galloping horses. He learned to fire his pistols from the saddle without dropping the reins. He learned to fight with a saber against multiple opponents. By the time he saw his first battle, he had already fought hundreds of simulated ones. Second, equipment. The Hussars had the best gear money could buy. Their breastplates were proofed against musket balls, tested by firing a pistol at them. Their sabers were made by master smiths in Hungary and Poland. Their horses were the finest in Europe. The Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth spent enormous sums on its hussars because the hussars were the Commonwealth's insurance policy. Without them, the Commonwealth would have been devoured by its enemies. Third, tactics. The hussars did not charge blindly. They chose their ground. They waited for the enemy to make a mistake, to overextend, to expose a flank, to tire. Then they struck, and when they struck with everything. Fourth, psychology. The wings, the leopard skins, the sheer visual and auditory terror of a hussar charge, it broke enemy morale before the lances even made contact. Men who had never seen a hussar before thought they were demons. Men who had seen them before ran anyway because they remembered the screaming. Fifth, and most important, esprit de corps. The hussars were a brotherhood. They fought for each other, not for pay or glory. They shared their food, their horses, their wounds. A hussar who abandoned his comrade was shamed forever. A hussar who died saving his brother was sung about for generations. That bond, that unbreakable warrior-to-warrior trust, is what allowed them to charge into impossible odds and win. The decline of the Hussars began in the 18th century. As gunpowder weapons improved, muskets became rifles. Rifles became faster to reload. Cannons became more accurate. The open field where the Hussars had dominated was replaced by trenches, fortifications, and massed infantry squares. The last great Hussar charge was at the Battle of Vienna. After that, the Hussars still fought. They fought against Sweden, against Russia, against the Ottoman Empire. But their glory days were over. By the 1770s, the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth was being partitioned by its neighbors, Russia, Prussia, and Austria. The Hussars fought to defend their homeland, but they were outnumbered, outgunned, and outmaneuvered. In 1795, the Commonwealth vanished from the map. The Hussars vanished with it. Some joined the armies of Napoleon. Some fought in the November uprising of 1830. Some simply laid down their lances and became farmers. The last living Hussar veterans died in the late 19th century, old men who still dreamed of the charge. But legends do not die. The winged hussars have become a symbol of Polish identity, of courage against impossible odds, of the beauty and terror of cavalry warfare. Today, you can see their armor in museums in Krakow, Warsaw, and Vienna. You can hear their story told in Polish schools, in folk songs, in heavy metal ballads. The Swedish power metal band Sabaton wrote a song called Winged Hussars about the Battle of Vienna. It has millions of views. Young people who have never ridden a horse still shout the lyrics, "Then the winged hussars arrived." There is something eternal about the hussars. Maybe it is the wings. Maybe it is the lances. Maybe it is the image of a man on a horse, feathers streaming behind him, charging into the mouth of hell without hesitation. That image speaks to something deep in the human heart, the desire to be brave, the longing for glory, the belief that one man on one horse with one lance can change the course of history. So what can we learn from the Hussars today? First, that innovation wins wars. The Hussars did not win because they were stronger or braver than their enemies. They won because they were smarter. They reinvented the lance. They perfected the wing. They created a new kind of cavalry that no one had seen before. Second, that psychology is a weapon. The wings did not kill anyone, but they made men run, and a running man is easier to kill than a fighting one. Third, that brotherhood is unbeatable. The Hussars fought for each other. They did not fight for king or country or God, though they believed in all three. They fought for the man on their left and the man on their right. That is why they did not break. That is why they kept charging long after any reasonable soldier would have fled. Fourth, that glory is not about winning. The Hussars won more battles than they lost, but their legend comes not from victory, but from the way they fought, with style, with fury, with wings on their backs. They understood that history remembers not just what you did, but how you looked doing it. Today, if you visit the Polish countryside, you can still find old barns with faded murals of winged hussars. You can find churches where hussar armor hangs as votive offerings. You can find fields where the grass still grows a little greener over the graves of fallen horses. And if you listen closely, on a windy autumn day, you can almost hear it. The thunder of hooves, the crack of breaking lances, the shriek of eagle feathers cutting through the air. The hussars are gone. Their kingdom is dust. But the charge of legends never ends. It just waits for the next rider brave enough to pick up the lance. And when that rider comes, when the wings unfurl, when the horse leaps forward, when the enemy sees the forest of feathers descending, history will hold its breath. Because some things are not just tactics or technology, some things are magic, and the winged hussars, the most terrifying cavalry in history, were magic on horseback. That is their story. That is their legend. That is the charge that saved Europe.